Afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to ace reading comprehension. My name is Rajat Sudana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your co-host today. Your main host today would be Harsha and Shraddha. Both Harsha and Shraddha are subject matter experts at e-GMAT and senior subject matter experts that too at e-GMAT. And they're going to make sure that we give you the key to excelling in GMAT reading comprehension. A lot of people think that acing GMAT RC is about reading tons of books. They feel that, hey, if you need to get to that 90th percentile in GMAT RC, you need to be a voracious reader. In this webinar, we're going to crush that myth. We're going to talk about what does it take to ace GMAT RC, how, if you read strategically, if you follow certain best practices with regards to how do you read an RC passage, you improve your comprehension. And once you improve your comprehension, how answering questions becomes very, very simple. In RC, there are very few concepts, and I think the two main concepts that exist in RC are main point and inference. Your detail is, I think, fairly simple if you improve your comprehension, but main point and inference are two concepts that are there. And to make sure that you're ready for this webinar, we did send a few concepts on main point. If you've not gone through these concepts, you can watch these concepts once you log into your free trial. Let me just use my pen. And so these are the two concepts on main point. Okay, with that, let me ask a couple of other questions. We have about 100 odd people here in this webinar. I want to understand what is your target GMAT score. Let's just see. Where is my question? Let's just put that in a short answer poll in the interest of time. What's your target GMAT score? If you can put your answers in, once I get about 25, 30 answers, I'd be happy to broadcast the results. We have the category as well. Thank you, Harsha. Perfect. Yes, you can also respond over here, but let me broadcast results there as well. So you can see lots of 730s, lots of a few 760s, a few 650s, and then a couple of people who are at 550 or higher over here. But in general, you see there's a big bulge in that 730 to 750 group. Quite a few of you in that 710, 720, and many of you in that 760 plus as well, and about 18% of you are in that 600 to 700 bracket. With regards to when you guys plan to take the test, you can see that the biggest group here is those who have more than 60 days. We also have a significant number of you who have between a couple of weeks to 30 days over here. Okay. Regardless of how long you have, the strategies that we talk about, if you execute them, if you spend about another 8 to 9 hours on them, they can have a significant impact on your RC ability, which in turn can have a significant impact on your overall verbal score. Now, we have some upcoming free webinars as well. We have a Quant Workshop that is tomorrow. This workshop, think of it as a proctored mock test in which we discuss what your estimated quant score is, but in addition to that we also tell you, hey, what are your subsectional scores and what areas do you need to work on to improve your quant ability. So that's tomorrow over here. And then we have a free CR webinar similar to today's webinar. In this webinar we talk about this method called pre-thinking, which is a method that we pioneered about a decade back. And we demonstrate how by using pre-thinking you can tackle even the most challenging questions that the test is going to throw at you. So you can click on that register now button and register for these webinars over here. Now, how many of you over here are aiming for top business schools? Let's get a yes no poll over to this area. How many of you are aiming for top business schools and or are aiming for scholarships? Top business schools is top 20 schools in the world overall. So quite a few of you. So next week we have 2 sessions on our YouTube channel, and Harsha, if you could show the web links as well. Yes. So the first session that we have is this session over here. It's with Sharang, one of our former students. Sharang's journey is what I call as a turnaround journey. Sharang scored a 740 on the GMAT, applied in 2019, was rejected by every school that he applied to. He then focused on building his profile for a year and applied in 2020 during COVID time, one of the most competitive times, and got into 5 schools with 250K scholarships. In both these cases, the schools were top schools. Sharang decided to go to UNC Keenan Flagler, which offered him, I think, about $70,000 worth of scholarship over here. So his interview, it's on Tuesday. It's an excellent session to really learn about what is it that B schools look for, what is that B schools do not look for, what not to do in your application. Also, Sharang now works with UNC's admissions department, so he can give you those insider tips with regards to hey, how scholarships are distributed. And of course, he's going to talk about the importance of LORs and essays over here. So you can click on this, HBS plus scholarships. I think it should get you to the events page. Then the second session that we have is also with one of our former students or recent students, Rafa, as we call her. Rafa's journey is actually the complete opposite of what Sharang's journey is. She just wanted to get into Harvard. She applied to Harvard and she got in there. So she's going to talk about, hey, what is that leadership quotient that Harvard looks for? How do you prepare for a Harvard interview? How do you go about conducting yourself during the Harvard interview? And Rafa actually prepared for the GMAT in just about a month, and she scored a 730. She's going to really say, how do you define your areas of focus when it comes to your GMAT preparation? So again, we have about 10 sessions scheduled this month. So when you click on get the season pass, you'll go to a landing page and you can register through that. Okay. With that, let's go right into the webinar pane. And let us know if you'd like to see more such sessions appear in the short answer pod. If you think such sessions are going to add value, and definitely tell us what would you like to see. And you know, we have thousands of students in top B schools. We can always reach out to them and schedule such sessions. Okay, with that, let's kind of talk briefly about, before I pass on the mic to Harsha, let's just talk about why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher over here. If you want to, and I know some of you have already heard this, but many of you are joining us for the first time, so I'm going to briefly talk about this. So British B schools, yes, we do have some on the way. In fact, yesterday I was talking to someone from Scotland, so say we'll have some of that. Why should you aim for that score of 730 or higher? You know, there are 3 reasons why you should do that. One is top B schools now look for that score of 730 or higher. Specifically, over the last 5 years, students have looked for that score. The second reason is essentially that let me just increase the marker size. Perfect. If you want scholarships, you know, your GMAT score has a huge impact on the amount of scholarship money you get. And the third, probably the most important difference is when you look at what students do, those who graduate out of top B schools versus those who graduate out of tier 2 B schools, that delta in total earnings, that's the highest that it has ever been in the last 20 years or so. And I see that increasing. So, you know, getting to that score of 730 is not easy. It's no mean feat, but you'll have to make sacrifices to get there. But tell yourself, 700 versus 730 could be a difference of at least $500,000. Does that score of 730 apply to European schools as well? Yes, it does. I mean, in the sense that yes, European schools have generally a lower median GMAT score, and actually I'm going to record a video as to why that is the case. But scholarships, yes. GMAT score does govern scholarships and has a big impact on admissions over there. So just to really see this this trend, you can really see that going from 2014 to 2018, and you can really see, you know, schools that are going towards top schools going towards that 730 mark. Now there are 2 things that you would notice. One is no Harvard, no Stanford there. Why? Because even in 2014, at this point, they were already at that point. The second piece is you know, this is not just these schools. You know, for 23 out of top 25 schools, we've seen this trend happen. For 24, the score more or less remained the same. Certain schools such as Sloan and Columbia that disclose more details, they're 80% of the admitted class had scores of 700 or higher. Essentially what these schools are saying is, hey, if you can't get to that score of 700, don't bother applying. And this is despite the fact that we had a 15% decline in GMAT test taking population. Okay. And this trend continues. I mean, essentially whatever top 25 do, 26 to 50 do that. And you can see the dots over here are tier 2 schools where you see some of the biggest score increases in this case. This is statistical data. Here's some anecdotal data, and all of these are cases, full-length interviews, which you'd see on our YouTube channel. So Nishant, one of our former students, he scored a 690, applied in round 2, was rejected by TAC and in a bunch of other schools, improved his GMAT score to a 740, and he got a full ride from Ohio Fisher. He got an admit with scholarship from Columbia. And the good thing about applying to a school such as TAC is that even when they reject you, they'll give you a reason. And TAC told Nishant, hey, we love your candidacy. Your GMAT score is not just up there. For those of you who are really saying, Anishka asked a question, does work experience put you in a different bucket? You'll see many examples where people loved your work experience, or schools loved your work experience, yet did not accept your candidacy just because they felt your GMAT score wasn't there. Pravi, again, very similar, really good background, scored a 680, applied to many schools, did not receive a single interview invite in round 2. Then improved her score to 740, just updated that score. And within 7 hours of updating that score, she received 5 interview invites. She also received about $280,000 worth of total scholarship money, and she chose to go to Kellogg. KK or Krishnakant, one of our former students, scored a 680, applied to bunch of schools in round 2, was rejected by each one of them. Then improved his GMAT score to 720, applied in round 3. For those of you who are wondering, should he apply in round 3? Here's an example of a guy who improved that score to 720, kept the same application, applied to 5 schools, got a full ride from each one of them. And so this is an example of where, hey, you need everything in that application to fit together for you to start converting. Okay. Bottom line is your GMAT score is way more important today than it has ever been. And schools do look at GMAT score very, very favorably, as you can see with some of this data. The second piece, I think probably just as important as admissions, is getting scholarships. And US B schools give out about $350 million worth of scholarships. The top 10 European B schools give out about, I think, $40 to $50 million worth of scholarships. So there's a significant amount of scholarship money going around over there. And based on our estimates, the data that we have, and we just focus on merit-based scholarship. This is not need-based scholarship, but this is not special category scholarships. But 55% of that money goes to people who get to that score of 740 or higher. Pretty much all of it goes to people who score 710 or higher. Essentially, if you do the math, which means that if you get that score of 740 or higher, this is probably the bare minimum scholarship amount that you should aim for, or you should get if you apply properly. Okay, and there are 2 factors that decide scholarships. One is your GMAT score. The second is your likability during the interview. Again, this was statistical data, anecdotal data. Mansi, Victor, both former students, scored a 770. Mansi got about $90,000 worth of scholarship from Harvard. Victor got a full ride from Ross and Keenan Flagler. Kong Bui, again one of our former students, scored a 760, got 5 full scholarships. He chose to go to Ohio Fisher, where he not only got a full ride, but the school paid him $1,700 a month. And I'll repeat, $1,700 a month to study there. So he got a salary in many ways, or a stipend, as you may call it, to study there. Again, we've talked about Nishant, Pravi, and KK. You can see the scholarship amounts there. And again, when you get the PDF, these are actual YouTube links. You can click on this, watch their 30-minute long interviews, watch their GMAT and MBA journeys. Okay. As another very interesting example, we've actually seen about 5 such examples now. Ayush, one of our former students, scored a 710 and he applied to Ross and Columbia. He interviewed with them. He really connected during the interview, but both these schools waitlisted him. So he reached back to them and said, hey, I thought I did really well during the interview. I felt the schools were a fit given my post-MBA and my pre-MBA, post-MBA goals, pre-MBA experience. And both schools told him, he said, hey, we like your candidacy, but your GMAT score is just not there. So he didn't even apply again. He just prepared for the GMAT, improved his score to 750, updated that score, and both these schools converted that wait list to an admit with about 90K scholarship. And you can see many such success stories. Right now, we are hitting about that 150 mark. This is the world's largest collection of unedited success stories that you'd get on any channel. Okay, and there's a quote by John Fuller, who is the former admissions director at Ross. He says, someone with that 770 is way more likely to get a financial award. Why? Because the school wants to buy that high GMAT score. The third reason is that, excuse me, that delta in total earnings over a decade. I think this is the highest that it has ever been. And to prove my point, I'm going to compare two schools, Babson and MIT. Both these schools are in the New England area and the Boston area. They're about 20 miles apart. 70% of graduates from both these schools get a job in the New England area. So arguably they have access to a very similar set of opportunities. But when you look at their compensation, that's very different. The median compensation from MIT, this doesn't include equity compensation. This is just the cash component, whether it's base cash or your bonus, is about 165K. The same from Babson is about 105, 106K. So the first year delta is about 60K. Even if you assume that delta to be 45K, because you're not going to get this bonus every year, that leads to about 450K. Two schools located just 20 miles away. The crazy thing is, this delta was about $200,000 in 2005, which is when I did my MBA. This delta has been increasing, and I expect it to continue to increase. Why? Because as companies go to more top B schools, they have this preference of hiring students from top B schools, and they continue to pay them more. Okay, there are three reasons why you should get to that 730 or higher score. I want to just keep this slide in front of you before I pass on the mic to Harsha. And by the way, for those of you who need help building that 730 plus study plan, we do have keep some slots open for that. So so just click on this, and if you're facing with a very specific thing, we can schedule an appointment with a specialist where that person can help you build that personalized study plan, give you precise estimates of how long you need to study for quant or verbal, and give you those right metrics. Essentially, when you click on that link, you'll go to this page where you'd see, okay, what kind of issues could you be facing with? If you find something as a match, click on that and go from there. And you can book a slot with one of our counselors. Okay, if you're an e-GMAT student, you already have access to this. You have access to level 2 strategy experts. So make sure you work with them. Make sure you already have that study plan with you. Make sure you attend these onboarding sessions that are done twice a week. Okay, with that, Harsha, this is over to you. And I'm going to mute myself. I'm now going to pass the mic on to Harsha, who's going to help you excel in GMAT RC.
All right, so thanks for the introduction, Rajat. I think that really sets the context for everyone. Let me first do a quick sound check to see if you guys are able to hear me fine. So just give me one sec. And can you guys hear me perfectly fine? Is the audio coming through? If yes, click on yes. Perfect. So it seems that the audio is fine. So let me take this away. So let me introduce myself. My name is Harsha. I'm one of the RC experts at e-GMAT. I also look at CR for those of you who know me. What you got from the session so far, from what Rajat told you, is that, hey, getting a score of 730 is extremely crucial, especially if you're targeting those top B schools. The next logical question that you should be asking is, how do you get there? And the answer to that is, what you need to get a 90th percentile is the 90th percentile. If you want to get a score of 730 plus, you need a 90th percentile of RC ability. Now, that should be your motivation as we start the core of this session. So the first question that I have for you, what we are going to do is very, very interesting. We are going to talk about your RC approach before we get into how we go about RC. And the reason we do this is kind of what I call as self-diagnosis. It's the first step to actually improving in RC. So there are two components that I am particularly interested in. The first is motivation, the second is method. So the first question that I have for you today, and this is part of your self-diagnosis, is how many of you really enjoy RC? So put a yes if you enjoy RC in the yes no pod. And be frank, this is a completely low risk environment. You don't have to worry about, hey, I need to be politically correct. I need to demonstrate a liking for RC. Be frank. So you can see the results already. This at least 80% of you who straight away are very, very clear that you do not enjoy RC. And the next question is for those of you who believe that, hey, I really do not enjoy RC. And the question here is, what makes you not enjoy RC? And again, use the short answer pod, that is the pod on the left, the pod on the top for this. Why do you not enjoy RC? Let's hear from you. So these are the critical questions that we ask ourselves before we can do any kind of improvement. So let me broadcast the results if it's not already broadcasted. Let's do a check on that just in case. Yeah, you can see the results. Takes a lot of time, length, long passages, seems less in logic. Interesting. I enjoy it RC, but not the time limit. Dense subject matter. I totally understand everything. So one thing that I want to do through this session, and Shraddha will also take forward this particular idea, is we're going to try to address some of these problems that you guys are facing as far as RC is concerned. So the next question that I have is about method. When it comes to RC, there are typically three ways of doing RC from what I've seen. There are three types of approaches. The first is the skim approach. This is where you typically read through in like 1 or 2 minutes, irrespective of the length of the passage, you read through very fast and then you just jump into questions. The second approach is what we call as a questions first approach. In some cases, you may read the first and last lines for context, but typically you jump to the questions and then you try to figure out from the questions which parts of the passage you need to read. The third approach is where you read the passage. You take a little bit of time initially. You're not skimming through, you're reading in detail, and then you go to the questions. So a lot of you have mentioned 3. How many of you have gone for 1 and 2 as well? Let's actually hear about what is your current approach. Let's put it on the poll here. So I'm happy to see a lot of 3 here, by the way, because as far as we are concerned, 1 and 2 are not good enough approaches when it comes to the GMAT. I cannot speak for other examinations, but if you're looking at doing well in RC in the GMAT, trust me, 1 and 2 are not sufficient. You need to have approach number 3. And for those of you, a lot of you have told me that you have approach number 3. For those of you who are in approach number 3, we'll try to get you to be better at it in this session. For those of you who follow approaches 1 or 2, my goal today is to transition you to approach 3. That's one of my primary goals today. So now the question is, for those of you, especially for those of you who said that you already follow passage 3, and even for the first 2, why is it that you struggle in RC, if you're struggling in RC at all? Have you faced that situation where, hey, you did very well, you thought you understood the passage perfectly, even with approach 3, even after reading all the passages, and still when you went to the questions, you got stumped? Have you seen that happen to you? Vocabulary, no fixed method, lack of understanding, unable to remember. All right, that's interesting. Comprehension. So the fundamental point here is, even with passage 3, there is a level that we need to reach, and only after that level you'll actually see the results happening. But it does not take too much time. Around 10 to 15 passages, if you follow the right process, if you follow the right approach, you will see your RC will shoot through the roof in terms of accuracy and time. So let's talk about what is the level of understanding. This is the last part of the self-diagnosis that I want you guys to do. As per you, once you have read a passage, what is the level of understanding that you have? So don't put this on the short answer pod. I'm going to introduce another pod just for this. So once you guys have read a particular passage, as per you, what is the level of understanding that you have? This is your own self-assessment, so be frank. All right, so you can see quite a few of you in that 75 to 90% bucket. That's good. You just need a little bit more of a push. Those of you are in the 50 to 75% bucket, yes, you guys also need a bit of a push. So in simple words, I'll tell you what you need to get a 90th percentile ability in RC. To get a 90th percentile ability in RC, or in other words, what translates to a 730 plus performance on the GMAT, is an understanding that is greater than 90%. You have to be in that top bucket of 90 to 100%. Otherwise, unless you're extremely lucky, there's no way you're getting this kind of a show as far as RC is concerned. So essentially, as far as RC is concerned, any passage should take you somewhere between 3 to 4 minutes to read. And once you have read the passage, your understanding and comprehension of the passage should be greater than 90%. And it's only after this point that you actually go to the questions. And believe me, when you have this kind of a comprehension, when you hit the questions, you'll find that these questions are very, very easy in comparison. So even for those of you who are following approach 3, I could see that most of you are in that 50 to 75 bucket or that 75 to 90 bucket. So even if you're following approach 3, you would still get a lot from this session. So let's get right to it. What are we going to do in today's session? My primary goal today is to, especially if you're following methods 1 and method 2, to transition you to method 3. And for those of you who are doing method 3, to get you to a better level of refinement. My primary goal today is to change the way you do RC. We are going to look at how to get the maximum from the passage. I'm not talking about time, I'm talking about comprehension. How to comprehend the maximum out of the passage. And to do this, I'm going to introduce to you what we call as reading strategies. So at e-GMAT, we have 7 of them. 3 of them are the focus of this particular session. And the next step which we are going to follow is we are going to take these reading strategies and we are going to apply them to answer questions. Once we have built a very good level of comprehension, that level of comprehension, we'll see how to use it to tackle questions. And if that is done, we are not going to leave it at that. We are going to demonstrate to you that everything that we are trying to tell you here works on the GMAT beautifully. We are going to apply our learnings as far as strategy, using these reading strategies are concerned. We are going to apply those to a 700 level OG GMAT RC passage. So I hope you guys are looking forward. If you're looking forward, let's hear a yes on the short answer pod. One cardinal rule, make sure you participate. That's how you learn. That's how you get feedback as well. All right. So I started this session by talking about 2 things. That's motivation and method. Oh, lovely to see so many yeses. So the first point is motivation. And this is something that I always start the RC sessions with. Especially for all those of you, the 83% of you who told me that, hey, I do not enjoy RC. There is an attitude fix that needs to happen. Why do I say that? Keep the end goal in mind. You want that 730 plus. That requires a 90th percentile ability. That requires a greater than 90% comprehension. The only way to do that is 100% immersion in the passage. And I'm going to explain to you what I mean by 100% immersion. There's a difference between being a passive reader and being an active reader. What do I mean by that? Typically, how you read a newspaper or how you read your storybooks, that's called passive reading. When I say active reading, I mean that you are making connections between the text, between one line and the other. You're making active inferences as you're reading. You're summarizing things as you read. That's the difference between reading passively, the way you read a storybook, and reading actively, which is what is going to get you a good score on the GMAT. So it's all about getting immersed in the passage with the idea of visualizing the author's intent. In those 3 to 4 minutes that you're going to read the passage, your job is to understand everything the author is telling you. The passage may be short, the passage may be long. You don't care. The passage may be on a topic that you're not familiar with. It could be humanities, it could be sociology, it could be quantum physics. You do not care. The concept is that you become so immersed in the passage, the topic does not matter. You have to truly be topic agnostic. And I'm sure a lot of you have that worry as to, hey, but I'm not comfortable with humanities or I'm not comfortable with physics. Trust me, it will not matter if you're able to apply the strategies well. So what are the strategies that we're going to talk about? That's where the method comes in. So on the motivation side, to recap, make sure that you fix this attitude problem. Learn to love RC. You need to put in that effort. Without putting that effort, RC is not going to smile at you. All right. So now let's talk about what exactly I'm talking about as far as the method is concerned. So we're going to introduce to you 3 reading strategies today for those of you who have never been in this session. The first one is at the sentence level. If you talk about why is it important to focus on sentences? Eventually, an RC passage is just communicating some ideas to you. Ideas create sentences. Sentences lead to paragraphs. Paragraphs lead to your passage. If you can understand what's happening at a sentence level, it's like the molecular level, then you have a better chance of understanding the passage. So we're going to break down complex sentences. The thing about GMAT is a lot of times you have this extremely convoluted and extra long sentences with a lot of jargon thrown in. We are going to break it down into chunks, understand each chunk bit by bit, and extract the meaning out of it. So that's something we are going to focus on. The second reading strategy that I would like to introduce to you today is one of my favorites. It's called keywords. What are keywords? Keywords are specific words or phrases that an author uses in writing a GMAT passage, which has a very specific function. The author uses it to communicate something to you. A keyword is like an anchor word. If you keep track of it, if you notice it while you read it, you'll be able to unlock a layer of meaning that you otherwise would not have got. For example, I'll give you a quick example. When you're talking about, say, a passage tells you that GDP is extremely useful as a measure of national output, and then you have a word like however. Pardon my handwriting, it's not that great, but you have a word like however. The question you have to ask is, you should pause when you see this word however and ask the question, what is going to follow this however? So in the first line, I told you that GDP has this very good use of being a very good measure of national output. What will follow, however? Or in other words, I told you something positive about GDP. What will follow? Who can answer that question? Change of direction, contrast, absolutely. So if I told you something positive about GDP, what is going to follow, however, is the negative. What I want you to do from today, from this session onwards, is when you come across words like this, however is just one of the examples. When you come across a word like this, pause right there, ask the question, what does this indicate? Why did the author put this here? He or she is indicating to you that there is a contrast, there is a change of direction. So you know that what is going to follow is a negative aspect of GDP. For example, it could be something like, however, GDP is a very poor measure of standard of living. You guys are getting this? Why is this important? It kind of primes your brain to soak in that information easier. It's like setting the foundation so that you can retain that information easier. In simple words, the information sticks in your head, which improves your comprehension if you pay attention to this word. That's, for me, is one of the most important reading strategies that you will see. The third reading strategy which I want to focus on is one of the most underrated ones. It's called summarization. I told you about active reading. I told you about one of the key components of active reading is summarizing the content that you have read as and when required. How do you know when to summarize? It's simple. As you start reading something, there is a point where information overload happens. There's a point where you get a sense that, oh my God, this is too much to keep track of. You pause right there, you summarize everything you read so far, and then and only then you move on to the next line. If you do this, following the next piece of information, understanding what is going to follow, much easier. You will see a huge improvement in your RC just by doing summarization. So these are the 3 strategies that we are going to discuss today. So let's get going now. I am reiterating this point. We are going to read slowly. It's RC. Doing well in RC is not about going fast. It's about reading slowly. You read slowly, read once, read slowly. You will still save time. We are going to discuss timing later, but keep this in mind. We are going to go slow. If you guys are ready for the first passage, it's a short passage. And don't worry about timing. I will make sure that you guys have enough time to read the passage. So let's begin. Once you guys are done reading the passage, click on this done reading poll. Click on yes in done reading. All right, so several of you are done. I'm going to introduce the question, but before that, I'm also going to ensure that for those of you who need to refer to the passage is there at the bottom. All right. So the passage is at the bottom. Let me bring in the poll for you for this particular question. Let's take this out. So here's the question. And as always with these sessions, we always tell you that always click on still solving before you begin the question. That way, you guys as a group can time yourself. I know when to move on. All right. So click on still solving, all of you who are actually going to solve this question now. And then I'll bring in the question as well. Perfect. So here's the question. It's a main point question, by the way. All right, let's take another 10-15 seconds and then let's start discussing this question. Last 5 seconds, guys. 3, 2, 1, and let's hold this. All right, so let me first broadcast the results. Let's see how the group has performed. So 21% of you went for option B, another 19% of you chose option C. Option D was the most popular option, chosen by 51% of you, and we're going to see which of these is the correct answer very, very shortly. So let me take this off. How did you guys feel about this question and this passage? Let's talk about the passage. Forget the question. Tell me about the passage. Easy, difficult in terms of comprehending it? It's definitely not sub 600. But for most people, it's difficult. For some of you, it may be easy. Medium, incomprehensible, complex structure, absolutely. Didn't know what schismatic means. Yes, my friend, we are going to discuss that as well. That's a very interesting point that I want to address. All right, so it's by no means an easy passage. It's a short passage, but it's not an easy passage per se, because the words are a little, there's a bit of jargon thrown in. The sentence structure is somewhat convoluted. So there's a lot that makes it a slightly complicated passage. Now we're going to apply the reading strategies the way it's meant to be applied. So pay a lot of attention to what we are doing. All right. So let's begin. Bordering on the extreme, one definition of ethnocentrism. I'm going to pause right here. We have only hit 8 words, but I want to pause here because there's already a lot of information here. Can you guys tell me what is meant by bordering on the extreme? What does this actually mean? What does it indicate? Use the short answer pod. I see a lot of different types of answers here. The correct answer, I see, like some of you have got it, almost extreme, extreme view, an extremist thought. That's actually the correct answer. So when you say bordering on the extreme, one definition, what is meant by extreme? At some level, what the author is trying to tell you is, whatever this is describing, in this case, it's describing some one definition. It's telling us that, hey, whatever it is, it's a little exaggerated. It's a little extreme. It's not the regular way of looking at it. Is it not? Do you guys see that? When you say bordering on the extreme, one definition. So that one definition, whatever it is, it's a little extreme. It's not the regular general way of looking at it. It's somewhat exaggerated. Yes. And just from that first 4 words, that's an inference that you're making. That inference is, hey, whatever is going to follow, that definition is a little exaggerated. Now the next question I have for you, also a very important question. Why did the author mention one definition? What is he or she trying to tell you by putting this, by this phrase, one definition? Why not just say, bordering on the extreme, ethnocentrism is a schismatic in group something something? There are many other definitions. That's, yes, definitely something you can say. What else is there? So what you guys are saying is correct, but there's also something else that's important here. And that's what I call as viewpoint. The author is telling you, when you say one definition, one inference that you can make right off the bat, and this is what a lot of you have mentioned here, is that means there are multiple definitions. That's one inference. The author is also telling you something else. This is one definition. This is not necessarily my definition. This is not necessarily the definition I agree with. Hey, I'm presenting to you one definition of EC. I'm not telling you that this is the definition I agree with. The author may agree, may not agree. I don't know. But you can definitely say the one thing you can say is it's not necessarily the author's definition. How many of you got that? We don't know whether the author, that's a good point. We don't know whether the author is neutral on it. All we know is we don't know the author's definition. He is just presenting one definition. That's just from the first 8 words. So what we know is bordering on the extreme, one definition that may not be the author's definition of ethnocentrism. Let's call this as EC. All right. Considers it a schismatic in-group, out-group differentiation. Now, I do not know what schismatic is. I agree with one of you who wondered what schismatic means. I also do not know what it means, but let's move on. When you say in-group, out-group differentiation, some difference between what is called as in-group and what is called as out-group. That much we can still get, right? That's something we can still get. So now let's move on. So bordering on the extreme, one definition of EC considers it to be some differentiation of in-group versus out-group, in which is a keyword. In which, the minute I see in which, I'm pausing right here because I know that what is going to follow is a description of what in which is referring to. What is in which referring to? This in-group, out-group differentiation. So the author is now going to give a description of what this differentiation actually is. Everybody with me so far? It's very important to pause right here and take stock. Okay, differentiation in which. So now you're going to get a description of what the differentiation is. Now let's move on. Internal cohesion, relative peace, solidarity, loyalty, devotion to the in-group. Okay, this is already very complex, so I'm pausing here. What did I tell you at when I was introducing the reading strategies? What did I tell you we should do when you read a bit of complex text? What should you do? Before you move on, what is it you do? Absolutely, summarize. So now let's try summarizing this. Who can try making a summary of this? You need to pause, you need to summarize. This is exactly how you apply reading strategies. Why don't you guys try to summarize? If you had to put that in one simple phrase, what would you say? Those are not features. Those are not features. I would simply say it's not advantageous. It's not exactly advantageous. He's telling you that cohesion, peace, solidarity, loyalty, devotion. At some level, is it not? Somebody got it right. Attitude towards the in-group. It's telling about that attitude, right? It's at some level a positive attitude or a positive feeling towards the in-group. Does that make sense? Solidarity, loyalty, devotion, peace. These are all positive sentiments, right? Some level of positive feeling towards the in-group. That's something you can still get just by summarizing it. Perfect. Then you see another keyword, are correlated with. So I pause here. What is are correlated? What is a correlation? What is that in other words? Absolutely linked with. So what I've got so far is, hey, there is bordering on the extreme. So there is this exaggerated definition of EC which considers some kind of a differentiation between in-group and out-group. And what is this differentiation exactly? You have this positive sentiment, positive feeling, or like or love, whatever it is, towards the in-group is linked with, now let's move on, a state of hostility towards the out-groups. Or in other words, you can say hate towards the out-groups, right? Some sense of some negative feeling towards your out-groups. Does this make sense? Some differentiation where some kind of a positive feeling towards the in-group is linked with or correlated with some kind of a negative feeling like hatred towards the out-group. Then you have this word which. Whenever you see words like that, which, you need to ask what is it referring to. It's referring to out-group here. So out-groups which are often perceived as subhumans. So these out-groups are being perceived as subhuman. So you're talking about people and not things or objects. So what exactly is this? Some differentiation where love for your people is linked or correlated with hate towards the outside people. Does this make sense? This is the given definition. This is not necessarily the author's definition, and that's the key point. Perfect, perfect. So if you guys have done this level of analysis, then you should be able to get all these points, right? On one side, you should be able to figure out that one definition of EC is presented, which is not necessarily the author's definition. How do you know that? Because of the use of the words one definition, paying attention to words. Then if you had focused on bordering on the extreme, if you had paused for a minute there, paused for a second there and made an inference, what is meant by bordering on the extreme, you would know that this particular definition being presented by the author is a slightly exaggerated one. And then if you had summarized this very complex piece of text that is given to you, you would know that as per that particular definition, there is a correlation between some positive feeling for your own in-group versus some negative feeling for the out-group. Now the question I have for you is, how many of you got all this when you were analyzing this particular passage before you went to the questions? So in the poll that I'm putting on your screen, select the items, select the inferences that you are not able to get. Select the items that we are not able to get. Not even close to it. Don't worry, we are getting there. But this is how we learn. We're introducing a concept here. Almost 70%, 75%. So you can see there is a significant chunk of the class here that has not got all these. Only 20% of you got all this. But actually a lot of you got, around 50% of you got the correct answer, which is option D, by the way. But still, only 22% roughly have got all the correct answers. And that's where, my friends, the learning curve begins. If ideally, what I mean by greater than 90% of ability, greater than 90% of comprehension is this level, where you're able to get all these points just by one read of this, the way we have read it now. Imagine having this understanding before you go to option choices. Because now we are going to do that. You guys are going to tell me why each option is incorrect. So let's go through the options. Let me bring back the poll results here. How did we do? Let me take this away. If you guys have any questions, you can put it on the Q&A also while I'm discussing this. All right. So, very few of you choose option A. The problem with option A is, does the author criticize a concept? The concept here refers to ethnocentrism. The question you have to ask is, does the author merely presents a definition of EC? The author does not criticize EC. He's not talking about the concept EC. He's just given you one definition of EC. About that definition, he passes a judgment that, hey, it's a little exaggerated. So there is a criticism at some level of that one particular definition, but that's not necessarily the concept, right? So that's one reason it's wrong. And nowhere in the passage do we know that EC actually encourages hostility, because we are not given anything about ethnocentrism. So that's why option A is not the correct answer. Let's go to option B. Option B was chosen by a lot of you. Now I really have to ask, why did you choose option B? What made you choose option B? For those of you, the 21% of you who have chosen option B. Features, but think about it. We are given one definition of EC. Those are not features. A definition is not the same as the features of it, right? A definition of EC would be different from the features of EC. And there's also the problem that the author is not evaluating the concept of EC. The author merely presented one definition. To evaluate something, by the way, to evaluate something is to consider both the pros and the cons of something. In this particular passage, has the author evaluated EC? No. All he did was present one particular definition of EC, not necessarily EC per se, and then he told you that it's a bit exaggerated. Fell for the trap according to the author. Absolutely. Unless explicitly stated, when you're talking about according to the passage, you're also talking about according to the author. So be very, very wary about that. So there are no features being discussed here, by the way. It's only the definition that's given to you. That's why option B is also not the right answer. So for those of you who chose option B, is this clear? To evaluate means pros and cons. We are not discussing pros and cons. Definitely we have not discussed anything about the actual concept of EC. Just one exaggerated definition of EC, and no features being presented here. So let's go to option C, which is also somewhat popular, but now you guys know. Has the author defined EC, or did he just present one definition of EC? That's the straightaway immediate way to reject option C. Did the author give the definition of EC? No, right? He just gave one way to define EC. That's very, very important. How would you eliminate this answer choice within 5 seconds after you read this option choice? Because you would have, in your passage analysis, you would have figured out that one definition is not necessarily the author's definition. And when you have that clarity that one definition is not the author's definition, the minute you see to define the concept of EC, you know that this is an incorrect option choice. That's your first reason to reject it. You would have taken 5 seconds to reject this. The other reason, as one of you points out, is hierarchy. There is no hierarchy being mentioned here, right? There is just correlation between one group and correlation between two groups. There's just this correlation that's mentioned. Correlation does not imply hierarchy, right? You cannot assume that. That's another reason to reject. But fundamentally, I want you to focus on this one. Which brings us to the actual correct answer, which is to introduce the concept of EC by presenting a view on it. Why does this make sense? Just to introduce a particular concept to you, is it fair? Is it okay if I just present one definition? I'm not telling you that I'm defining EC for you. I'm just telling you that, hey, I'm introducing you to this particular concept called EC. I'm doing that by presenting a particular definition. This question can be considered 700 level, only because of the complex terminology. Once you figure it out, it's very easy. But any doubts here? You guys are able to see why this is correct? The analogy is, imagine I bring you, you come to my house for a party. I'm introducing you to a friend of mine. If I'm introducing you to a friend of mine, I'm not necessarily telling you whether that particular person is a good person or a bad person. I'm not giving you my opinion of that person. I'm just introducing you to that person. Similarly, I'm just introducing you to the concept of EC, but I'm not giving you my take on what EC is. I'm just giving you one definition of EC. Does it make sense now? That's how you're introducing a concept. To introduce something to you, it doesn't have to be your definition. That's the key point. Perfect. If this is clear, there are some learnings from this question which I want you to take away. What do you not need to ace GMAT RC? First thing, you do not need to be an English scholar. You do not need to have a grip on words like schismatic. As we discussed, I still don't know what this word actually means. It does not matter. On the GMAT, you will always come across words that are slightly difficult to follow. If it is an important word, the author will explain what it means. Otherwise, the author may not even test you on it. You may not even get a question on it. We didn't have a question that tested you on the meaning of schismatic, right? This is not a vocabulary test. That's the point. That's a very, very important learning for you. GMAT is a test of your logical ability. It's a test of your ability to comprehend. What it is not a vocabulary test. Is that clear? Neither did we have to worry about complex sentences. The sentence that you actually saw is a very complex sentence. Even if you're not the kind of person who's used to reading extremely complex pieces of text, by breaking down the sentence into manageable chunks, extracting information from each chunk, we were able to arrive at a very, very strong level of comprehension, right? That's a very important learning for you. The second point I want to impress upon you, you do not need specific subject knowledge. Most of us are not from the background where we know where ethnocentrism is. How many of you actually know about ethnocentrism beforehand? I'd be very surprised if a lot of you know about this. Exactly, most of us don't come from a background where we would actually know about this. But did it matter? The approach that we followed, when you apply it well, you will still be able to. And this is what I mean when you say you have to become topic agnostic. It did not matter. Ethnocentrism, I don't care. The next passage is quantum physics, I don't care. You'll still be able to do it. That's the confidence you need. Only 10%. All right. So get out of this mindset that, hey, if it's a topic I don't know anything about, I'm going to struggle. No, you can do fantastically even if you don't know anything about the topic. So that's something you need to really, really drill into your head right now. So the next point is, what do you actually need to do well in GMAT RC? what we did right now, did you see the level of detail we got into? Did we see the level at which we were getting into the passage? Just based on the first 8 words, we drew 2 inferences, bordering on the extreme, one definition, just based on the first 8 words. That's the level of immersion you need. That's what I mean by active reading, reading with intent. Breaking down large sentences, focusing on keywords, summarization. You saw it's a very, very underrated strategy. You should be doing it with all your reading. So, everybody looking forward? Learning coming through? Are you guys enjoying this now? If so, we are ready to go to the next passage. Perfect. It's great to see that, yes. So let's go to passage number 2. Remember, you have to apply everything that you learned. It's going to be a similar passage. In fact, it's a very similar topic also, in fact. It's similar. I want you to try to apply everything you learned right now in this particular question. Let's get right to it. The question, by the way, will be an inference question. We've already done main point. Now I want to tell you a little bit about inference. Let's get right to it. Once you guys are done reading the passage, make sure you click on yes. All right, so I can see that a good number of you have gone through the passage. As always, I'm going to bring the passage here for your reference if you guys need it. So it's right here at the bottom of your screen. I'm going to bring in the question now. So similar to the last time, guys, first click on still solving. Perfect. So now here's the question for you. Remember, this is an inference question. All right, guys, so let's take another 10-15 seconds and then let's start discussing this. Three, two, one, and let's hold this. All right, so let me quickly broadcast the results here. So option B was the most popular option, it's chosen by 37% of you. Option A is slightly popular, 22%. Option E is the next popular option, around 27%. So there's a split jury as far as this question is concerned. We'll come back to this question later. Let's, drag this away. And let me hide this because we're going to discuss the passage anyway. So let's hear from you. How did you find the passage? Forget the question. Let's talk about the passage. How was the passage for you? All right, very good read. Nice. You're enjoying RC now. I like that. Summarize quickly this time. Perfect. Better than the last one. Very interesting. Now you guys tell me, how many of you were able to apply? How many of you believe that you were able to apply the reading strategies that we just discussed? So I'm going to make this a yes/no poll. How many of you believe that you guys were able to apply everything that, or at least to some level you were able to apply? Good. I like that 85%. So to those of you who were able to apply, did it help? Did it help you? You can put it in the short answer pod. How was it? Good. That's the kind of response that we love to see. All right. So now let's look at this particular passage and see everything we need to understand. So remember, we are looking at an inference question here. So we're going to discuss a little bit about inferences as well. First, let's take a small detour. Let's look at this particular question I have for you. Just read the passage. If you guys have read the passage, now the question I have for you is, which among these two statements can be inferred? And I just brought the poll in for you right here. Two options, right? Which of these can be inferred? The reason we are taking this detour is it again brings a very important concept that I want to discuss with you. Perfect. So we got a fair number of responses. I'm going to broadcast the results now. So if you look at the results here, 56% of you believe that statement 1 and statement 1 alone can be inferred. 28% of you believe that statement 2 can be inferred, and 13% of you believe that both can be inferred. So the correct answer is only statement 1 can be inferred. And the reason for that is there is this very interesting keyword here, considered to have. The author is not telling you that the color blue has a soothing effect on the moods of people. The author is telling you that the color blue is considered to have a soothing effect on the moods of people. Exactly the same way one definition of EC may not necessarily be the author's definition. Considered to have a soothing effect does not mean that the author also considers blue to have a soothing effect. So there are some people who consider blue to have a soothing effect. The author's point in mentioning this considered to have is to let you know that, hey, there are some people at least who believe that blue has a soothing effect. I'm not telling you that I consider it to be that way. Do you guys see that? If the author wanted to communicate to you that the color blue, as per the author, the color blue has a soothing effect, this considered would not be there. It would simply be something like this: the color blue has a soothing effect on the moods of people. The author's purpose in putting that considered to have is to let you know that, hey, I may or may not agree with this particular view. In this case, the color blue is soothing is a valid inference. Do you guys see that now? It's a very, very important point. And this again is what I tell you when I say you need to pay attention to those small words. Imagine when you're reading this passage, you paid attention to that particular word, considered or deemed. If you have done that, the meaning you take away is completely different. Now let's come to the passage. Ethnocentrism, as again, just like last time, let's just call this as EC, and its canonical variants are deemed to be. What is deemed to be here? How is it similar to what we just saw? Exactly the same, right? Deemed to be, considered to be. In that case, what is the author telling you here? Why did the author put this deemed to be here? To let you know that it's not necessarily his or her view. So EC and its canonical variants. No, he's not telling you it might not be connected. Yeah, that's true. But he's trying to tell you that I may not really agree with this particular notion. So in reality, EC may be connected, EC may not be connected. You do not know. Perfect. I can see that you guys are getting it now. So EC and its variants. Canonical, I think, typically means something like identical, but similar to schismatic. Even if you don't know, it's fine. Let's move on. So EC and its variants are deemed to be intimately connected with xenophobia or XP, right? Or in other words, hey, there are some people who believe that EC and XP are closely connected, intimately connected. Everybody with me so far till this point? Perfect. Now you have this comma, and then you have this very, very long convoluted text which goes all the way till here. What did I say about convoluted text? What do you do? Perfect. Chop down, summarize. So let's hear a summary of this from you before I bring in my answer to this. If you had to summarize that entire complex attitudes system cum sentiment structure involving aversion, dislike, etc., what would you say it is? Oh, for those of you who are saying it's a definition of XP, spot on. I really like that answer, but also give me a summary of it. It's a definition of XP, but what does the definition say? That's also something I'm interested in. Perfect. Dislike towards outsiders, hate for strangers. That's a very concise and beautiful representation. Aversion towards aliens. So you guys are getting it, right? I don't have to explain why this is. You guys are getting it. So you're getting a definition of XP. You guys summarized it and told me, hey, it is at some level aversion towards aliens, hatred towards alien, dislike towards aliens. Perfect. You guys got this. The next question is, some of you got this portion as also right. It is the definition of XP. Is it something that the author agrees with? That's the next question. It's presented as a definition of XP, but is it something the author agrees with? This is where there is a little bit of confusion. So perfect. So we know that EC and XP are considered to be intimately connected. EC is considered to be intimately connected with XP. Then you have a comma, and then you have this, what seems to be a definition of XP. The question is it something the author agrees with? The answer for that is actually yes. Did the author tell you that this is one definition of XP, or this is one of the many, many definitions that exist? No, he just put a comma and told, hey, this is what it is. He did not indicate to you anywhere that this is a different definition from what I agree with. I'll give you an example for this to make a little more sense. And yeah, let's put this in. Let's look at this. You guys can see this, right? You should see a text about VRBO, Verbo. In this, Verbo is considered a unicorn, a company with $1 billion valuation. So if I ask you the question, is Verbo really a unicorn? You're not 100% sure, because Verbo is considered to be a unicorn. So there are people who are considering Verbo to be a unicorn. But what happens after the comma? A company with $1 billion valuation. The author is giving you what is meant by a unicorn. The definition or description of what a unicorn actually is. Isn't that something the author is telling you? Exactly. It's the definition of unicorn being presented by the author. It's not like here the author is telling you Verbo is considered a unicorn and a unicorn is considered to be a company with $1 billion valuation. You don't have that considered or deemed to be applying to this definition piece. The author has given it to you as a statement of fact. Hey, this is what a unicorn actually is. Do you guys see this now? Perfect. If you guys understood that, now come back to this passage and see what exactly is happening with xenophobia. Xenophobia, comma, and what is xenophobia? That entire description of xenophobia is what is being given to us. Or in other words, this beautiful summary that you guys came up with. It is the description or definition of what xenophobia is, even as per the author. The author has told you to tell you what it is. Clear? Concept coming through? Very important. If you got this, you got the gist of it. Perfect. Now let's move on. Some socio-cultural anthropologists. See again how beautifully the author lets you know that this is not necessarily his or her opinion. Right? Some socio-cultural anthropologists even considered XP and EC opposite sides of the same coin. You need to kind of pause here. There is a very important keyword here, even. How many of you saw understand what even means here? What does it even do in this particular passage? Moreover, related, but impact. Some of you are on the right track. So even is what we call as an emphasis keyword. Let me explain. In the first line, the author told you that EC and its variants are considered to be intimately connected with XP. Fine, EC is connected with XP as per some people. Then the author is now coming and telling you that, hey, there are these other people, anthropologists, who go to the extent to say that they are not just connected, they are practically opposite sides of the same coin. Or in other words, even is telling you, it's taking it to the extreme that it's not just connected intimately, it goes to the level of saying that EC and XP are opposite sides of the same coin. What does this mean? Opposite sides of the same coin goes to an extent to consider. Now you guys are getting it. But what is meant by opposite sides of the same coin? Opposite to each other is interesting. No, think about what happens in a coin. When you have a coin, there is a heads and there is a tails. But what do you know? One cannot exist without the other. They practically coexist. Part of the same concept. Yes, same. They're practically the same. One cannot exist without the other. If you have a heads, you also have a tails. Not necessarily complementary. It just says that EC and some people consider EC to be intimately connected with XP. But some people, these social anthropologists go on to say that it's not just connected, it is so connected that EC and XP are practically two sides of the same coin. Or in other words, they coexist together. Do you guys see this happening now? It's very interesting, right? How the word is there. Somebody's put it in caps, coexistent. They may be different, but the point is they coexist. They are so strongly connected that they pretty much coexist. That's the key point. They may be opposite to each other. That's not something we're interested in here. So let me also tell you a little bit about even, because it's kind of interesting. Even, as I said, is an emphasis keyword. If you look at the first example, it's pretty similar to what you see in the passage. Shaq was the most dominant basketball player of his time. Some analysts even consider him to be the most dominant player of all time. So Shaq is the most dominant player of his particular time period. But there are these people, some analysts, who say he's not just the most dominant player of his time, he is the most dominant player of all time. Isn't this exactly what is happening here? Do you guys see the connection between this first example? Yes, perfect. Even can also work in the other direction. Decreasing emphasis is also possible. Look at the second direction, typically in combination with not. So GDP is increasingly a poor measure of prosperity. It is not even a reliable gauge of production. It indicates that it's even less useful. Clarity? So the key learning here is just that one word even is it's a keyword that helps you connect line 1 to line 2. Just 1 minute, guys. I was waiting for that. So this one word even connects line 1 to line 2. Remember, this is what I told you when I said you have to keep making inferences. You have to keep making those connections as you read. Imagine doing this level of analysis when you're reading. Much better understanding of the word even. Perfect. So here, that's what is happening here. So EC and its variants considered to be closely connected to XP. XP, you know what it is. You guys gave me the summary. Some experts, these sociological anthropologists, they go to the extreme of saying that they are not just connected, they are connected to such a degree that they practically coexist. And then you have this last portion. Again, there is this keyword, but. The minute you see this but, you know, similar to the however, I gave you an example of however in the introduction, right? It has the same impact, right? Shows contrast, exactly. So there is a contrast that's coming here. So some people go to this extreme. Now, therefore, what will follow is, hey, it's not that much of an extreme. But a few voices have cautioned that this need not be the case. Or in other words, there are these other experts who disagree with this above notion that XP and EC coexist. I think this is clear to most of you. If there's a question, can you just put that in the Q&A? We'll help you out there as well. Overall, are you guys getting this? Yeah, just put it in the Q&A or put it here. I couldn't see your doubt. That's why I couldn't respond to it. Put it in the Q&A. We'll get through it. Don't worry. So fundamentally, if you have done the same level of analysis for this passage as you did for the last passage, you should be able to get all these 4 points. There is this new term, XP. You guys were able to summarize it, hatred for the alien. Some people believe that EC and XP are closely connected, not necessarily the author. Some other experts that it's not just closely connected, they practically coexist. And there are some other experts who think otherwise. 4 pieces of information that you can extract from this passage. Now the question, as always, just like in the last question which I have for you, how many of you got all 4? Or rather, how many of you did not get all 4? If you understood all, go for understood all. Let me kind of make sure you can see these 4 points. Yes. And that's the core point. And even in the results of this question, some of you by now you would have figured out what is the correct answer just by the analysis that we did, right? Yes. So very few of you were missed out on the first one, which means a lot of you were able to summarize that well, which I'm very happy to see. Like I said, summarization is a underrated skill. It's the inference piece that went wrong. Some experts think easy and you got confused by opposite sides of the same coin. You did not focus on that word, even the emphasis that it adds. So for the 61% of you who understood everything, I'm very, very happy for you. So when there is a word even, does it mean the first sentence support the second? It is emphasizing what was mentioned in the first. In this case, even was adding that extra emphasis. You really have to see the way the passage is structured, how the sentences are structured to understand what is the meaning. But the point is, from this session on, I want you to focus on that word even. The minute you see even, pause right there, ask yourself why is that word there. In this case, it's not supporting the second sentence, it's building upon the first sentence. All right, good. So let's also talk, because this is an inference question, let's also quickly talk about what exactly is a correct inference as far as the GMAT is concerned, especially as far as RC is concerned. As far as GMAT RC is concerned, a correct inference is always from the point of view of the author. It has to be something your author believes in. If he or she, if you do not get the indication that the author believes in it, you cannot call that an inference from the passage. So when you see a question which asks you what can be inferred from the passage, it has to be something that the author believes in, something where you know this is the author's opinion. Which is why, yes, the right answer is C, which is why you'll see that all those other options will fall into the gutter once you start analyzing this. So a few more points. So the first point is correct inference always from the point of view of the author. It has to be something the author believes in. The author agrees with any facts where he's not given any disagreement. What does that tell you? That definition of XP, the author never told you that he disagrees with it. He didn't tell you that this is just one definition of XP. No, he gave it to you as the definition of XP, which means that's something that the author agrees with. It's an opinion that he has given to you. That's another point. Another question that a lot of students have as far as the GMAT RC is concerned. An inference on the GMAT can be a restatement of given information. So some of you have this notion that an inference cannot be what is given in the passage. It has to be a new point completely. Not necessary. The fundamental definition of an inference is, given the information in the passage, what can you say is definitely true? What is 100% true given the information in the passage? This includes the information that is given. So a restatement of given information can be an inference. A fact can be an inference as far as the GMAT RC inference is concerned. Did you guys get that? Make sure, because I answer a lot of your forum queries both in CR inference and RC inference, and a lot of you have this question. A restatement of given information is a valid inference on the GMAT, whether it is CR or RC. Take it from me. Perfect. With this understanding, now let's go to the options. So let me first broadcast your results if I haven't done it earlier. I've already done it. So option A was somewhat popular, but Option A says EC and XP are different facets of the same concept. This is the view of the anthropologist. The author never told you he agreed with it. That's why it's wrong. Correct? Do you guys see why option A is wrong? It's not the author's view. It's not something the author agrees with. That's why option A is wrong. Option B, very similar. Variants of EC are closely connected with XP. It is the view of some people, whoever is doing this deeming, whoever is doing this considering. You don't know the author agrees with that. And that's why you cannot say it's an inference from the passage. That's why B is also wrong. So B was chosen by majority of you. I hope now you see why B is not the correct answer. If you had paid attention to this point and figured out that, hey, it's not necessarily what the author agrees with, eliminating option choices A and B, each option is 5 seconds each. Of course, I can explain. Think about it. The answer is here. This is the deemed opinion of some people. The author never told you he or she agrees with it, right? That's the reason you cannot be sure about it. Deemed opinion, absolutely. It was not proved. It is some people, some socio-cultural anthropologists. Again, not the author. Again, not the author. And that's why option B is still not the right answer. Nowhere in this option do you get the author's view. I'll give you an example of how would you know if the author's view was there. Imagine in this last line, some anthropologists believe that XP are opposite sides of the same coin. Few voices have cautioned this need not be the case, and rightly so. If you had a word like and rightly so, that denotes the author agreeing with you. But you don't have anything like that. You don't know what the author's opinion here is in any of these things. Level of question, it's not 750. I would say it's anywhere in it's 700, but I don't think it's 750. But that's just my opinion as far as this one is concerned. Inferred and passage is inferred by author. The passage is written in the GMAT. The passage is written by an author. When you say what can be inferred from the passage, it is what the author will agree with. Good. So I see a lot of learning happening here. Now let's go to option C, which is not chosen by any of you. So I don't think we should discuss that. But again, it's the same thing. We don't know whether the author agrees with this view or not. Option D, some of you chose, but option B cannot be right because it brings in something called causality. It tells us that xenophobia is the cause behind ethnocentrism. Nobody in this passage, forget the author, even the multiple third parties have never mentioned that in this passage. So this option D is an option you should not choose. Even if some other party had mentioned, I can understand why you might have chosen for this, but causality is not mentioned by anybody in this passage. So it's not the correct answer, which means option E is the actual correct answer. Again, come back to those learnings. As I told you, a GMAT, correct option choice and inference is something that the author agrees with. This is the definition of XP which the author provided to us. It's definitely something that the author agrees with. So I think you can put it on the Q&A, will help you out, because I think I already explained option B. Fundamentally, the problem with option B, as I told you, is simply that it's only the deemed opinion. Some people consider EC to be intimately connected to XP. You don't know whether the author agrees with it. And if it is not something the author agrees with, you cannot call it a valid inference. That's the reason why option B is not the correct answer. So I hope that is clear. So coming back to what is it that you need to ace GMAT RC? I'm coming back to this 100% immersion in the passage. Remember how we went about this particular passage. Reading with intent. The difference between active reading and passive reading. Passive reading is how you read your storybooks and newspapers. You cannot do that for GMAT RC. Here you need to read with that immersion. You're making active inferences. You're connecting the dots. You're summarizing as you read. You do all this, you'll see your RC performance go through the roof. So we did all this. We broke down those big sentences. You saw a lot of complex sentences here. We made that connection between line 1 and line 2. Thanks to that keyword even. We focused on keywords. Deemed to be. The reason option B was wrong is this deemed to be. The correct answer was the summarization, which a lot of you were able to do. Purely summarization. So how do you feel? Do you guys feel that you learned something today? Something useful? Yes. Perfect. So if this is clear, before I hand over the next part of the session to Shraddha, let me quickly run you through this particular portion about the study plan. This is for all of you serious GMAT aspirants out there. If you have GMAT in the immediate horizon, then this is something that you probably need to do. If you're not planning to write the GMAT anytime soon, it's a different story. But if you have GMAT on your immediate horizon, it's good to have a plan. And the reason I say that is it's usually better to have a plan rather than not have a plan at all. You could wing it, but you never know. So one of the key aspects of making a good study plan is that you cannot just rip it off the internet. It has to be something that is tailored to you. Most of us are working professionals, so the available time for preparation varies. The date on which you're planning to take it varies. Your own strengths and weaknesses vary. Some of you are already super strong in RC. Some of you may not be strong in RC. So a plan that is tailored to you, where the milestones are set as per what you need, it could be a very good plan. A plan that is very precise in terms of, hey, CR is going to take you so long, SC is going to take you so long, quant geometry is going to take you so long. It can really help you in your preparation. And more interestingly, a plan that is metrics driven is a good plan. What do I mean by metrics driven? At e-GMAT, we actually look at data at multiple points and you get feedback. What this means is even if your plan starts going off course, because there is so much data being collected, there's a lot of feedback that comes in. You can always have course corrections to get you back on track as far as your GMAT preparation is concerned. So if you get in touch with our strategy experts, they can really help you make a good study plan. For those of you for whom this seems to be interesting and this seems to be useful, do consider clicking on this link. With this, I'll hand over the next part of the session, the GMAT official passage, to Shraddha. Hey Shraddha, all yours. I'm going on mute now.
Hello everyone. If you guys can hear me, let me bring in the short answer poll to hear from you. Give me 1 second here, guys. There we go. Okay, if you can hear me, could you please press your response as Y or yes, anything will work. Okay, great. I can see a lot of answers trickling in. Okay, so with your affirmation, let's move on with our session here. And after doing that fundamentals very strongly with Harsha, and thank you, Harsha, that was really great today. We got all the points very precisely. So now whatever we have learned so far, it's time to put it into practice through an official full-length passage. So it's not a very difficult passage. According to OG, it would be a medium passage, but what I would want you to focus on is all those points that Harsha just mentioned. We are looking at keywords, we are reading the passage slowly, we are trying to establish logical connections among the information in the passage. Once we summarize the passage, and once we understand the passage, that's when we attack the questions, and there are 5 questions related to that. So I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to do this passage. So here is your passage. Read the passage. Once you are done, I'll take a poll from you if you're all done. If 80% of the class is done reading the passage, that's when I'll start showing the questions. Okay, so all the best. 4 minutes. Your time starts now. If you're done reading the passage, you can click on yes. This way I will know how many of you are done so that I can start showing the question. So the poll yes or no is for those who are done reading the passage. Just press yes to let me know. All right. I see many of you are done reading. We'll take 30 more seconds, and after that, I'll show you the first question. Okay, let's wind it up. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do is now I'm going to show you the poll for the question. Now, before I show you the question, can you please click on still solving? In the meanwhile, I will get in the passage. Okay, so here is the passage. It's a scrollable pod. You can scroll up and down to get to the pertinent portion. Let me just make it a little more wide for you to see better. Okay, so can I get more responses for still solving so that I know that at least 70% of the class is with me on this? Okay, so here I'm showing you your first question. It's a main purpose question the passage is primarily concerned with. So go ahead, solve this one. All right, I've gotten responses from most of you. So let's now wind this up. I'm going to give you a 10-second countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Okay. I still see 6 still solving. Any takers for any of the answer choices? Just go for it before I close the poll. Okay, so here I end the poll, and let me bring in the poll for question number 2. Same drill. Could you please click on still solving? Still solving. None of the answer choices, please. Click on still solving. The last option right at the bottom. Okay. And here I show you your second question, the first few lines of which reads, which of the following can be inferred? So that's your question. All the best. Okay, we will start wrapping it now. Let's take another 10 seconds to make our selection. We've already spent upwards of 2 minutes on this. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, closing the poll here. Okay, bringing in the poll for our third question. Same drill. Click on still solving before I show you the question. Yes, I'm getting polls fast. Few more. Just about a few more. Okay. There we go. Okay. So here is your third question. It can be inferred from the passage. Another inference question. All right. Time to wind this one up. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right. Last minute answers coming in. That's fine. Now here I close my poll. Okay. Moving on to our fourth question. Here we go. Still solving once more. Let me quickly see some responses and then I'll show you the question. There we go. Question number 4 reads, the author mentions patients' ages. That's the first few words of the question. All right, this one came about quickly. Last 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right. I'm now about to close the poll. And now it's time for one last question in this entire session. The very last question for you. Once again, we'll do the rituals, still solving. Then we'll look at the question and put in our responses. So let's quickly do that. All right, here I show you your question. Question number 5, the last question. Read it well, read the answer choices well, and then make your selection. All right, as expected, this one seems to be confusing. Nonetheless, we will finish this one up. Last 10 seconds. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All right, closing the poll here. All right, so here I end the poll, and let me take away the poll from here. I'm taking away the passage also. Now here, before we move on to the analysis, how did you like this passage? Good, easy, bad, medium, whatever you want to say. Easiest of all. Yes, that's kind of nice to hear because our own passages were more difficult. Hard somehow? Okay. In my opinion, this passage is easy, but the questions, not all of them, but some questions do get a bit tricky if we didn't pay attention to the passage well. That might create some problem. Nonetheless, let's get right into the passage and try to understand what's going on in here, and let me get my pen. Okay. So the sentence, the passage says, Frazier and Mosteller assert that medical research could be improved by a move toward larger, simpler clinical trials of medical treatments. So this passage actually, so the author is, the first thing that we should note about this passage is that it starts, or the author presents not his own view, but the author presents the view of two people. And for the sake of time, we are going to call it F&M. Why do we need to pronounce the whole thing? So, and they assert something. When I read the word assert, it's not just saying Frazier and Mosteller said something, or they exclaimed something, or they proposed something. The word here is assert. That means whatever they are going to talk, they are 100% sure about what they are saying. And what is their suggestion is that okay, the medical research can be improved by doing two things. Let's make it larger and let's make it simpler. So these are the two steps in which the medical research can be improved. When I read these 2 points for the first time, in my head, I was trying to process, wait a minute, how can making clinical trials larger make it simpler? Because generally we think that if something is becoming larger, it's going to get more complicated. But no, F&M assert that you can make it larger and you can make it simpler to improve the medical research. So now when I stop here after my first sentence, I do a little bit of pre-thinking. The pre-thinking that I do is that, okay, what am I going to, or prediction rather, what am I going to read further? Now that we understand that F&M are suggesting some sort of improvement in the way medical research trials are done, probably the passage will show how it is done today and how F&M or F&M's suggestion by making it larger and making it simpler will come into play. How will it make it better? So with this, so when I do this predictive thinking, how does it help me? It helps me immerse in the passage better, because now I'm trying to think like the author. I'm trying to step into the shoes of the author, and by doing so, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to stay actively connected with the passage, and that's what going to make me an active reader. As we heard right in the beginning of the passage, that is what we need to become. We need to become an active reader, and we can do so by stepping into the shoes of the author. So by doing this predictive thinking, that's what we can do. Moving further, currently. So this is my keyword, currently, at present. So as we predicted, yes, the author is now going to talk about how the research is, clinical trials are carried out at present. Researchers collect far more background information on patients than is strictly required for their trials. So far more than required presents a comparison. Substantially more than hospitals collect. We see another point of comparison here. Why this comparison has been made? This comparison has been made in this part of the passage just to prove a point that clinical trials at present collect a lot more detail than they really need. So this comparison is just to lay emphasis on that point that clinical trials do collect a lot of data at this point. Now, mind you, this is the point mentioned by the author. This is not what F&M is talking about. Currently, researchers collect far more background is the information coming from the author. So this is one point that we will have to keep in mind. When we are reading through various information in the passage, we must be aware of the fact whether it is presented by the author or it is presented by some third party. We did so in the first two passages also. When we read bordering on extreme, we knew that it was just a definition presented by the author. It was not the definition from the author. And in the second passage also, we saw there were other third parties involved. Over here also, we say that although author starts with the statement or with the proposal of FNM, what the author is talking about how current research, clinical researches are conducted, and all these comparisons are coming through the author. Then we hit our another keyword, which is thereby escalating costs of data collection, storage, and analysis. So what this part is saying us is that, by the way, the clinical trials are conducted now, they collect way more data that has already been substantiated by the given comparison with the hospitals. And what does that lead to? What is the effect of collecting so much of data? The effect of is that it increases the cost, various costs related to collection, storage, and analysis. Reading further, although limiting information, so another keyword we hit here, which is a contrast presenting keyword. Although limiting information collection could increase the risk that researchers will overlook facts relevant to a study. Now, when we read here, limiting information collection, right, we understand that this part is actually connected to making the trials simpler, because here FNM is saying that, hey, you are collecting way too much data, you need to collect less data, right? And that is the step towards making the clinical trials simpler. Although it is not written very explicitly in the passage in this way, we can definitely infer that meaning because the context makes it very clear for us. Although limiting information collection could increase the risk that researchers will overlook facts relevant to a study, what's the contrast? FNM contend that such risk, never entirely eliminable from research, would still be small in most studies. So it's not that FNM has not taken into consideration the arguments that may come up against making the clinical trials simpler. They say that, well, yes, if you limit the amount of data that you collect, there can be a risk that certain variables can be overlooked, but hey, how can you totally eliminate it? That factor is never eliminable, no matter how much data you collect. But but even then, if there is this risk is very, very small. So really nothing much to worry about. Only, another keyword we hit here, only in research on entirely new treatments are new and unexpected variables likely to arise. So he says that, yes, if you are conducting a clinical trial on something that has never been researched before, yes, in those cases, we may collect a lot of data, but only in those situations. The things that have already been researched on, the ailments that have already been researched on, we can definitely make it simpler. So this is what, so our first paragraph talks about the simplification proposal made by FNM. So this is what we get in our first passage, benefits of simpler trial explained. Now we move on to our second paragraph. Now that the author has, now here we are again actively thinking what we read in our first passage, right? We saw that FNM proposed two ways of making clinical trials better, simpler. We have already read about it. So obviously, after in the second paragraph, what we are going to logically, again thinking as an author, what we are going to read is probably how to make clinical trials larger. Now, if we go back a little bit in the first passage, what all aspects did we read about. The author presented how currently researches are conducted, the downside of the clinical research, and how FNM's proposal can help in this regard. So these are the points we can expect to read, even connected with the proposal to make these clinical trials larger. So with this predictive thinking, let's read on the second paragraph. FNM propose not only, the moment we read not only, we understand that this will be followed by but also. So when we read not only, we know that the author is going to talk about two aspects of the topic. Okay, so not only that researchers limit data selection on individual patients, which is making the clinical trials simpler, but also that researchers enroll more patients in clinical trials. This is where the larger part kicks in, making the clinical trials larger, enroll more subjects for trials. And what will be the effect of that? The outcome, the result will be thereby obtaining a more representative sample of the total population with the disease under study. The more patients or the more subjects we include, the results that we are going to get is going to be more representative. That is their argument to make, this is the argument of FNM to make clinical trials larger. Reading further, often researchers restrict study participation. This is again, we are talking about the current ways of doing research. This is what the author has presented for the first part also. When he was talking about the simpler part of it, the author did give us the information what's the status of the researches conducted currently. The same is being presented here as well. Often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments besides those being studied. Right? So only those subjects are enrolled in the clinical trials who suffer only and only from that ailment that is being studied. A treatment judged successful under these ideal conditions, this is what we need to pay attention to. These ideal conditions can then be evaluated under normal conditions. Now, what is the proposal of FNM? They are saying that, hey, if you enroll more people into these clinical trials, so this is the second phase of doing the research, because what is it saying? A treatment that is already judged successful, that means it has been evaluated to be successful under these ideal conditions. What are these ideal conditions? The ideal condition is that no other ailments besides those being studied. That means the subjects who suffer only from that particular disease that is being studied. That is the ideal condition. But what will happen if more people are enrolled? Those treatment or that treatment that has already been evaluated successful under these ideal conditions can then be evaluated, can again be evaluated, right? So this is our second round of research that we are talking about, can then be evaluated under normal conditions. And what is this normal condition? Well, we can say that it's not that most of the time we suffer from only one disease at a time. There can be various medical conditions going on in a person's body, and that is more a normal condition and not an ideal condition. So if the clinical trials are made larger, then a treatment that has already been judged successful can be evaluated further for its efficacy under normal conditions. So here it's talking about making it even larger. Moving further, FNM propose, okay, so in this part of our paragraph, what did we read? benefits of a larger trial being explained. If you make the trial larger, the results will be more representative, and the treatment that has been judged successful can now be evaluated under normal conditions. So this is what we read. Last part, broadening the range of trial participants, FNM suggests. Now this portion again is the information coming from FNM. Broadening the range of trial participants, FNM suggests, would enable researchers to evaluate a treatment's efficacy for diverse patients under various conditions and to evaluate its effectiveness for different patients groups. So the researchers can evaluate the effectiveness of a treatment on two grounds. The first ground is that patients under various conditions, and then for different patient subgroups. In two ways, the treatment can be evaluated, or the effectiveness of the treatment can be evaluated. And then the author presents, for example. Now the author here is not expecting us to just understand, hey, what do we mean by diverse patients under various conditions? That's very, very specific. You know, how do I understand that? Or what do you mean by patient subgroups? You know, so the author understands that that's a very specific information, and so the author now presents an example of what he or she means by patients under various conditions and different patient subgroups. For example, the value of a treatment for a progressive disease may vary according to a patient's stage of disease, right? Not in fact, let's put it this way, many diseases are progressive in nature. For example, cancer, they have different stages, and so we understand that the treatment involved in various stages is different, right? So which treatment will be most effective or will be effective for a cancer patient in a particular stage, these kind of evaluation can also be done if more patients are included in clinical trials. So that's the example of various conditions, patients under various conditions. The last line of the passage says, patients' ages may also affect the treatment's efficacy. And we know it from our general dealings that not everybody is given the same medicine or same dose of medicine to treat the same condition. For example, even if we are running fever, kids, infants have a different dose, toddlers have a different dose, teenagers have a different dose, adults have a different dose, right? So according to age, the composition and or the amount of the medicine may vary. So FNM suggests that if we include more people, or if the researchers include more people in the clinical trial, then evaluating the efficacy of a treatment will be much better. We will get much representative samples in that case. So, well, as I said, the passage itself was not very difficult to understand if you followed. But the things to keep in mind is that as we are reading, what are the things that we did to have this clear understanding? One thing we did was that you'll have to keep on, predicting. Okay, after first line, we read about larger, simpler trials. As we were nowhere, the passage says that, okay, this is how FNM suggests to make the clinical trials simpler, and then the author explains. No, the author just throws the first sentence at us, and then he starts describing whatever he has to describe, right? But from the context of the passage, we could understand that the first passage talks about simpler trial and the second passage talks about making the trial larger. And this we could do only by getting immersed in the passage. And if we compare the information presented in both these passages, in both these paragraphs, we see the similarity. You know how well-rounded this paragraph, this passage is. There are no loose ends. There are no loose ends here. No questions that is not answered through this. How current trials are taken, how can it be simpler, and what will be the plus points? How current trials are done today, how they can be made larger, and what will be the plus points of that? So these aspects are equally covered in a very balanced manner in both these paragraphs. So a very well-rounded passage, and that's the beauty of every single RC passage that you will see in your official guide. Nothing will be left for you to keep scratching your head about. All we need to do is we need to stay immersed and focused in the passage. We can do so by actively paying attention to the keywords. And why paying attention to keywords are so important? I would say a couple of reasons. These keywords, firstly, they establish the relationship among various information in the passage. They establish the link between the previous information and the present information, or maybe the coming information. You know, we read currently. Okay, what we had read, how it can be improved. Okay, so how it is done now currently comes in, thereby presenting the effect, the downside of collecting so much data. Then the contrast. Okay, what if you are running into a risk? We have an answer for that. Only in a research. When will be that condition when we would require more data? So all these keywords that we look at, they establish the relationship among the information presented in the passage, and understanding of these relationship is very, very important to understand the exact meaning of the passage. Another point is that these are not very fancy words. These are words that we use in our day-to-day conversation, and they are used very frequently across all the RC passages. You will see, although, you will see, however, you will see, thereby. But if you are into the habit of keep taking a note of these keywords at the right juncture in the passage, you will be able to understand the direction of the passage and how the author is thinking as he's presenting the passage to us. And then we can do some predictions as well, as we did when we were reading this passage as well. Okay, so now that we understand the passage, we summarize the passage, we will do the quick, we are ready to move on to our main point question. So let's get to the main point. Let me bring in your poll for the main point question. And let me tell you, you guys did pretty well across the 5 questions that we did today. So here is the poll for the first question, and obviously our first question was the main point question, as very easily understandable by the language of it. So before we look into the answer choice, we do a little pre-thinking. We already have our summaries ready with us for the 2 passages that we read. The first passage is about the benefits of making the trial simpler. The second part is about benefits of making the clinical trials larger. So basically, through this passage, the author presents a 2-pronged proposal to improve medical trials, right? So this is the pre-thinking that we do. Now, do you all agree with the pre-thinking here? Put your responses in yes or no poll. The short answer poll. Right. So after thoroughly doing our passage analysis, we can even pre-think our answers. And this is what we are going to look for in our answer choices. Now, if you look at your results, we clearly got D as the winner, which indeed is the correct answer choice, with more than 50% of the class selecting it. We hardly got, I mean, for choice B, just one taker. I'll just quickly talk about choice A, which says identifying two practices in medical research that may affect the accuracy of clinical trials. Choice A is incorrect for two reasons. Identifying two practices. The passage is not identifying two practices. Rather, FNM is just the proposal. It's not even a practice. So there is no question of two practice. Secondly, accuracy of clinical trial. And you must have noticed that this accuracy part has been played in almost every question that is there in the passage. At least one answer choice brings up this accuracy part of clinical trial. The passage nowhere talks about accuracy of clinical trials. It is just talking about improving these clinical trials. Both are very different things. Improving the clinical trials and making them more accurate. Different things, right? So on these two grounds, choice A is incorrect. Choice D indeed is the correct answer. We got some votes for choice C also, so we'll quickly look at it. Evaluating an analysis of certain shortcomings of current medical research practices. You could have only chosen this answer choice if you did not read this answer choice very, very properly. But changes are not done. Yes, that's why the author is saying describing proposed changes. The author doesn't say describing changes, proposed changes. What changes can be brought? What changes can be made? And they are still proposed changes, not accepted changes already, right? So you missed on this part. So that's what I say. Our reading and comprehension does not stop at just the passage level. We have to extend our comprehension to the question and answer also. And that's what I'm going to show. When you read choice C, let's take a look at this part first. Certain shortcomings of current medical research practices. Okay, yes, they can be shortcomings. That is fine. How about this part? An analysis. Does the passage present the analysis of this shortcoming? That's still just one part of it. No, it doesn't. There is no analysis of shortcoming. And then what is author doing? Is the author evaluating, presenting the pros and cons of the entire analysis of those shortcomings? I mean, this answer choice makes it so, it just makes it so complex. But this is just not the idea of choice of the passage, presenting pros and cons of the analysis of the shortcomings of current medical trials. This is not that is happening in this choice. So choice C is absolutely out. Okay. Quickly, let's take a look at choice E, because choice E also got a lot of responses. Firstly, how such trials are likely to change. How do we know they are likely to change? They are just in the proposal phase. Whether they will change or they will not change, we have no idea about it. No idea at all. The passage doesn't say that, hey, FNM has proposed, they have been accepted, very soon the trials will be conducted the way FNM say. No, the passage doesn't say that, right? So for that reason, choice E is out. So choice D is the correct answer. Good to see that 50% of you were on the, more than 50% rather, were you on the right track. Let's move on to our second question. And here, let me bring in the poll for the same. Which of the following can be inferred? So we are looking at an inference question from the passage about a study. So we need to make certain inference about the study that is mentioned in the line often researchers restrict study participation to patients who have no ailments. So this particular study that is mentioned in this particular sentence, we need to infer something about that. Okay. So if we understand now that we understand the question, let's do a little bit of pre-thinking over here. So this part of the passage talks about the study. What kind of study? Here the FNM is talking about making the clinical trials larger. That means these studies are very limiting. Why? Because they choose subjects, only those subjects who suffer from only that particular ailment under research, right? So the result of these trials are not very representative. They are very limiting. That's our first factor that we understood. And such studies only cover ideal conditions. These are the two pieces of information mentioned about that study in our second paragraph. So with this pre-thinking that, our answer choice should be somewhere in the line of these two information, now we will proceed to look at the answer choices. Now here, if I broadcast the result, you guys did pretty well. Not better than, for main point question, you did better than this one, but yet good responses here. Choice A indeed is the correct answer. Choices D and E were the next most popular choices. So we will take a look at D and E both. So what does choice D say? It would allow researchers to limit information collection without increasing the risk that important variables can be overlooked. Let me tell you this. This sentence that the author is talking about is mentioned in which paragraph? It's mentioned in which paragraph? First paragraph or second paragraph? Paragraph 2, right? And paragraph 2 talks about what aspect? It talks about making the trials larger. But remember, the variables cannot be missed was mentioned about making the trials simpler, not about making the trial larger. So you actually focused on the wrong part in the passage to select choice D. This is not even in the context. The context here is to how to make the study larger, but the points about variable was mentioned in the context of making the clinical trial simpler. So this one, choice D, is not the correct answer because the information is not even in the context of the sentence about which we are supposed to draw the inference. Hence, choice D is wrong. So those who chose choice D, do you now understand? Where did you make a mistake? Make sense? So basically, important variables has been mentioned in the passage regarding making the trials simpler, right? That's when the author says that, hey, collect less information. Why? Even if you collect less information, you are not going to miss too many variables. Don't worry about it. That risk is very, very small. That was about making the trial simpler. But this statement over here, about which we are supposed to make an inference, is made in connection with making the clinical trials larger. So this information is not even about the larger clinical trials. So that's why there is a mismatch over here. Okay, let's take a look at choice E. Its findings would be more accurate if it concerned treatments for a progressive disease than if it concerned treatments for a non-progressive disease. Two faults in choice E. There is no comparison between progressive disease and non-progressive disease. The treatment, what will be the treatment For the progressive disease and non-progressive disease, that has not been talked about in the passage. The passage just says that, hey, you will be able to evaluate the the effectiveness of a treatment for various diseases. So progressive disease can be one of them. It doesn't say that how it will fare for progressive disease or for non-progressive disease. So that comparison is not there. Again, another error, more accurate. In this question, we see this accuracy part being played one more time. And why it is so? Because, you know, when we are talking about trials, clinical trials, of course, this is, you know, somewhere at the back of our mind, we kind of assume or presume that, yes, the clinical trials are going to be more accurate. By the way, the passage is not talking about making clinical trials accurate. It is talking about improving the trial. But here, the test taker or the question or the test maker has played with this thought process that the test makers understand that we might have, you know, bringing in our own assumptions that, okay, the more we are, okay, clinical trials, some proposals have been made. Okay, so probably the trials will become more accurate. No, just improve. That's all that the passage is saying. Nothing else. So, accuracy and this comparison make choice E incorrect. Okay? But they indirectly said that with larger number, it would be more reliable. So if you are talking about choice D, variables have not been mentioned there. What are they saying? What will be the plus point? What does the passage say? You'll have to stick to the information in the passage. The passage clearly says that if you include more people in your clinical trials, you will be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the treatment for various patients in various conditions. That's the first point. And you will be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the treatment for different patient subgroups. These are the only 2 points that the passage mentions about the positive of making the clinical trials larger. It doesn't talk about variables at all. Okay? So that's why choice D is incorrect. All right. Moving on to our question number 3. And as far as I remember, you guys did pretty well with this one as well. So yeah, you guys did very well with this one actually. So I'm not going to show you the results as of yet. Let's first understand the question. Now, here we have, it can be inferred from the passage that a study limited to patients like those mentioned in the same line, it's the same line that the author is mentioning here in the question, would have which of the following advantages over the kind of study proposed by FNM? Now, if you really simplify this question, this is all that we get. What is the advantage of current way of conducting studies? That one advantage that you can see from this line mentioned in the passage. That's all. So, you know, just look at that. The question creator has used how many words to just trap us into that question, because we will first take some time to, you know, dismantle the question and try to understand the meaning of it. And that's why comprehension will continue with our questions and answers as well. So now that we simplify the question, we understand this particular trial, this particular sentence talks about 2 groups. By restricting participations, those who have only that particular ailment, that is the ideal condition, and the proposed way to increase the size of trial, right? So with this understanding, if we go back in there, here is, we will do a little pre-thinking. So why at the first place this proposal to make the trials larger? Because the author is saying that the results are not very representative. Okay, so if we in these kind of situation where the patients are only where the subjects are only in ideal conditions, or they suffer only from that, then the results are very limited. But what happens in that case? They are looking at very limited variables about that particular treatment, right? Because their subjects have only that particular ailment. So with that understanding, when we move on to how it is advantageous, I mean, you can go through all these notes. We have just added a few slides to make you understand that, how to read the question properly, and advantage, when we are talking about advantage, how to understand that. So let's now take a look at the answers here as to what is the advantage of the current trials over the FNM's proposal. Choices A and B are wrong. Once again, see, more accurate. Definitely, accuracy is not discussed. Third question where we see this point being played upon. Okay, not right. Cost is not mentioned. Only one of you chose it, so I'm not going to talk about that. Choice C, it would limit the number of variables researchers would need to consider when evaluating the treatment under a study. This is the only advantage that the current study has. Why? Because the current study choose only those subjects that have only that particular ailment. But if so, the variables there are definitely limited. But if the clinical trials are done the way FNM proposed, then they will have to include all those patients also who have other ailments along with the ailment under study. So in that case, the number of variables will increase, right? The number of variables to be studied will increase. So definitely looking at limited variable is an advantage of the current trial system. Okay, so that's why choice C is the correct answer. And we have already spoken why choice A is wrong, more accurate, again, not working here. Choice E says it would enable researchers to assess the value of an experimental treatment for the average patient. This is just not correct. Why? Because the current trial systems do not even enroll average patients. They enroll ideal patients. So this is just not the correct answer. Okay. This confusion could have happened with choice E if you did not understand these ideal conditions and the normal condition part in the passage. If you did not pay attention to that part and you did not understand what is ideal condition and how you can connect average patient with normal conditions, that's when you will end up marking choice E as the correct answer. Okay, right. So that is what the problem here is. Okay, moving on to our next question. Question number 4. And let me quickly clear the poll here. Okay. Question 4 says, the author mentions patients' ages in the line. Patients' ages may also affect the treatment's efficacy primarily in order to. So this is what we call a purpose question or a function question. Why has the author mentioned that particular thing in the passage? This is the function or the purpose question. What is the purpose of that particular mention in the passage? So we will do a little bit of pre-thinking because, if we go back here, why patient's age has been mentioned? Because the author says that, hey, patients, effectiveness of a treatment also depends on the age of the patient. That's why that patient subgroup, when the author was talking about subgroup, that's when the author says that FNM proposed to make clinical trials larger, because in that case, what will happen is the researchers will be able to evaluate the effectiveness of the treatment on different patient subgroups. That means they will be able to see whether this particular treatment can be similarly effective or effective on different patient subgroups. So that's why the age has been mentioned, and that is that is basically an advantage of accepting the proposal of FNM to make the clinical trial larger, right? So with this pre-thinking, that of course this was the proposal to enhance the clinical trial, and with a patient's subgroup, we'll be able to understand the effectiveness of the treatment on larger number of patients. So with this understanding, what is the function of it? So most of you, in fact, choice D got the maximum number of votes, and for today, out of all the 5 questions, this is the most, this is where you got closest to most accurate. So 66% of the class went with the correct answer, which is the author has exactly mentioned patients' ages to illustrate a point about enrolling a wide range of patients in clinical trials. This is why the author mentions the patient's age. Hey, include more people, so that you can make your clinical trials wider or larger for better representative samples, right? So patient's age has also been mentioned. Progressive disease has also been mentioned for the same purpose. But we have the question only on patient's age. So this is the reason why the author talks about patient's age. Okay? But the author says that the age may vary a treatment's efficacy. I am not sure what you're asking, because that is not what the passage says. The passage simply says that in enrolling more people will help researchers evaluate the effectiveness of the treatment on various patient subgroups. That's all what it says. So the last line says patient's age may also affect a treatment's efficacy. What does it mean? It means, this is the last line of the passage, right? What does it mean? That patients of different age may require different treatments. So how will you understand the treatment's efficacy? It is talking about the effectiveness of the treatment on various patients' age group. That can be judged through different patients. So basically, the point has been mentioned to support the proposal that, hey, make the clinical trials larger. That way, you can get more representative answers. This is the purpose. This is the purpose why the author has mentioned about patient's age. Why? To support the fact that what FNM is saying about making the clinical trial larger will actually improve the clinical trial. And that is what the passage is all about. Does that make sense? Yes. Okay. So, well, as I said clearly, choice D was the most popular answer choice for this question. We'll quickly take a look at C. The primary purpose was to indicate why progressive disease may require different treatments at different stages. Think about it. It says why. That means it's presenting the reason. Does the author anywhere say why progressive disease require different treatments at different stages? Has this been mentioned anywhere in the passage? That, okay, progressive disease require different treatments at different treatments, and this is the reason why it happens. Does the passage ever say that? Anywhere? No, it doesn't, right? So choice C, is absolutely the incorrect answer. Okay? All right. This is a medium RC passage according to OG's gradation. So yeah, I would say anything between 600 and 700. Yeah. Okay. Moving on to question number 5. According to the passage, which of the following describes a result of the in which researchers generally conduct clinical trials? Now, this was by far the most tricky question in the entire passage, and I can substantiate that by looking at your results and also by the time that you took to answer this question. You took the longest to answer this one, and probably this got tricky, although the question is really simple. What you need to understand is that what is the outcome presented by the author about the current clinical trials? Okay, that's what it asks. According to passage, which of the following describes a result of the way in which researchers generally conduct clinical trials? So what is the outcome of what outcome is mentioned in the passage about the current clinical trials? Now, if we go back in the passage, two results have been mentioned about the simplification part, where the author is saying that the current trials incorporate a lot of information, right? And that's why what happens? The costs increase. Cost related to data collection, data storage, and analysis, this part, right? So that's first consequence, okay? When it comes to talking about keeping the trials limited, when it does it in the limited situation, limited condition, or ideal conditions, if I were to use the language from the passage, then what is the outcome? The application in real life is limited. That is, the results obtained through the clinical trials are not very representative. They are very limited in their application. So these are the two outcomes that the author has mentioned about the clinical trial. Now, the correct answer choice can include both, can include only one. So let's see what is the correct answer over here. Choice A indeed is the correct answer. However, this time only 38% of you went with that, right? Only 38% of the class went with choice A. They expend resources on the storage of information likely to be irrelevant to the study they are conducting. So this is the first consequence of the outcome of collecting too much data. And that's why FNM say that, hey, limit it, right? So this is the outcome of collecting too much data over here. Now, in my understanding, why people do not choose choice A? Because they say that, hey, the passage says that the cost of three things goes up. The cost of collecting data, storing data, and analyzing data. All these costs of all these three go up, but this answer choice only talks about the storage of information. But even if this answer choice talks about only one aspect of that, do you think that is incorrect? Does it make the answer choice incorrect? If I say the cost of A plus B plus C go up, right? But that is what is mentioned in the passage, that cost of A plus B plus C go up. But in this passage, in this answer choice, the author is saying that, hey, the cost of B goes up. Okay, so is it incorrect? No, it's not incorrect. It's just that the author has not included the other two factors in this answer choice. But that doesn't mean that it is incorrect to say that the cost of storing information goes up. No, this is still correct. Hence, choice A is the correct answer. It presents the outcome of the current clinical trial. Okay? Likely to be irrelevant? They expend resources on the storage of information likely to be irrelevant. Why? Because the passage clearly says that they collect so much information that they may not even require. Remember that comparison with hospital? Substantially more than hospitals. What does the author want to say here? That, hey, they collect so much information that they may not even use, irrelevant information. And this is mentioned in the passage. If you go back in the passage, you'll be able to see that it is mentioned in the passage, that they collect way more data than required. That's the term that it uses. Okay, choice C. I will talk about choice C because that's the next most popular answer choice over here. Why choice C is incorrect? Is this the outcome? They avoid the risk of overlooking variables that might affect their findings, even though doing so raises their research costs. Okay? The thing is, the author talks about, what does the author say in the passage? And let me bring in the passage here for our quick reference. Then we'll be able to map it correctly. Right? There we go. What is the author saying here? Here. Although limiting information collection, let's focus on, let me just highlight it in a different color so that you can see that. Maybe blue would have been better. Yes. Okay. So the author is saying that limiting information collection could increase the risk of limiting the variables, but the passage clearly says that that risk is never eliminable from the research. That risk is never eliminable from the research. So can we say that they avoid the risk? They totally let go of it? Does that ever happen? Can that, okay, so let me, yeah, here. Will that ever happen? That they will totally avoid it? Read this line, pay attention to the highlighted part, and then look at choice C, and then tell me, what does the word avoid mean? Just to let go, not even consider, totally, forgo of it. You totally forgo of something, right? But that doesn't happen because the passage clearly says that you cannot avoid the risk of overlooking variables completely. No matter how much data you collect, there is still a possibility that some variable might be missed. So there is no way that researchers can avoid the risk of overlooking variables if they continue to conduct the trials the way they do, even by collecting all that data. That is not the outcome of conducting the clinical trials. Okay? So, but this is not researchers' point of view. Yeah, that's fine. We are looking at a detailed question. We are not looking at an inference question. We are looking at a detailed question and never entirely, this is not an inference question, right? This is a detailed question, an information that is mentioned in the passage. Remember that. Does that make sense? And the passage is not from the researcher's point of view anyway. The passage is from the author's point of view, and the author seems to be agreeing to what FNM says, because the author not even once says that, by the way, what FNM says does not make sense. There is always this, the author is presenting the plus points of FNM's proposal, right? They anyways are overlooking variables, then okay, fine. So I guess you understand why choice C is incorrect. And we are not discussing other answer choices. You can take a look at them because they have not gotten much responses. So yes, with this, we wrap up this session. So once again, just the basic key takeaways for RC is that you need to be immersed into the passage, Remain an active reader by keep paying attention to those keywords that help you understand the relationship among various information presented in the passage, because that helps you visualize the passage well as to in which direction it is going. And if you keep following that direction of the passage, time and again, you will be able to do predictive thinking, and that will keep you focused with the passage. That will help you answer the questions. So with this, I will hand over the mic to Rajat. Rajat, all yours.
All right. Thank you, Shraddha. And with that, let me just make sure I have the right microphone. Yes, this is the right microphone over here. So that was some session. And at this point, let's get some feedback. What are some of your key takeaways, guys? First of all, I hope you guys can hear me clearly. And then what were some of your key takeaways from this session? Let's get those key takeaways. You can put those answers in the short answer pod. Okay. How to read effectively, take notes and summaries. Structured pre-thinking is useful. All right. Spend time understanding the passage. All right, good. This is exactly what we want to do, what we intended to achieve when we started this webinar, that we want to make sure that you guys have a proper approach to GMAT reading comprehension. Approach is half the battle. Once you have the right approach, then the other half is making sure you build the right concepts, making sure that you understand what are some of those keywords and how those keywords are utilized, learning how to build connections, and then once you do that, answering questions becomes simple. Okay. Again, I want to talk about the 3 reasons. I think you already know these, why you should get to that score of 730 or higher. And you need to get to that 90th percentile if you want to get to that score of 730. Yes. So how do you go about doing that? So how do you get to that 90th percentile in RC? First is you've got to develop that method of reading slowly. Now, one of those things, for how many of you this is the first time you've heard, hey, you've got to read slowly to ace the GMAT, or I've got to slow down to ace the GMAT? For how many of you does this come as a surprise? Okay, what have you typically heard about the GMAT? In terms of what is it that you need to ace? Okay, skim. Speed up. What else about timing? Focus only on the major points. Now, can you tell me, could you have answered these questions? Try solving tough questions. All right, good. Now, this is something which I want you to contemplate and sit down to really say, hey, for all those people who are recommending those things, to really say speed up, try solving tough questions, focus only on major points. How many articles, how many videos have they, impactful articles have they created? How many success stories have they delivered on the GMAT, especially on the verbal section? And you know, then you ask yourself, this was an official passage, the passage that Shraddha solved. Could you have solved this passage effectively and consistently, which means, hey, not just in practice, but also in the exam, if you skim through the passage, if you speed up? Is that possible? No, it's not. You won't, it would simply not be possible to do this. I mean, another question that you have to ask yourself is, the GMAT, which is a test that's designed to make you ready to be able to face business school curriculum, why should this test worry about speed reading? Why should it be a test of speed reading? When the whole intent of the entire MBA program is to help you make good decision makers. In this world, we are paid to make right decisions. We are paid to make good decisions. We are not competing against computers. No, we want to make sure we use computers to our advantage. Because the day we start competing against computers, that's a battle we are never going to win. Okay. Now, let me ask another question. If you want to get to a V40, which is 90th percentile, how many questions do you need to answer correctly? Bare minimum. And that's a question that I don't like to be asked, by the way, but if I were to just put this out to you to really say, hey, out of the 36 questions, how many questions, if you answer those questions correctly, you can probably get a 90th percentile out of the 36 questions? The answer is more around that 24, 25. Okay. The point that I'm trying to make is, as long as those 24, 25 questions that you answer correctly are the more difficult ones, you can still get to that 90th percentile. The problem is, if you speed up, you're going to make mistakes, and even though you may get 24 to 25 questions correct, they would not be the difficult ones. And with 25 questions correct, you can get to a 30th percentile. With 25 questions correct, you can also get to a 90th percentile. The question is, what's the difficulty level of those 25 questions or so? Which means that, hey, one, you have ample time. B, you need to learn how to solve difficult questions correctly, and you need to slow down to be able to do that. So the first thing is, master that method of reading slowly, and master that method of reading just once, not twice. If you want to solve your timing problems, the first thing you need to do is avoid rereading. How many of you, when you speed up, reread? Or read again? Because you always, yes, you slow down, you will not, the need to reread a passage or reread an argument is going to kind of go away. So that's the way to speed up, which means slow down to speed up. And the second thing is, use information and data, your own personal data, to your advantage. Okay. So again, as I said, this is an advice you won't hear slowly. Why? Because those people who ask you to tell you that, hey, I'm going to teach you tricks, I'm going to save you time, they probably wouldn't have delivered a ton of success. Not nearly as much as what we have delivered over here. So here is how life goes about if you read the passage slowly. If you slowly read the passage, and for most passages which are medium or not as dense, you're going to spend about 3 minutes reading a passage, and that's, remember this, a GMAT RC passage at the most is about 410 words or so, which means if you spend 3 minutes, you're kind of reading at about 125 to 130 words a minute at the most. And it's the max is 410. The average length of a passage is about 360 words. So which is 3 minutes is plenty of time as long as you read slowly. Now, post this session, you probably will take 5 to 6 minutes. Why? Because you're still not as familiar with those keywords. You're still not as familiar with transitions. Your brain's still learning how to assimilate that dense language. But trust me, as you build that habit of reading slowly, you're gonna find that those 5 minutes get converted to 3 minutes, but you don't compromise on comprehension. Once you comprehend a passage, then to answer a question, you'd probably need just about a minute to answer a question. For most difficult passages, it'll take you about 4 minutes to read, and that's okay, because for more difficult passages, you're only going to need about 45 to 50 seconds to answer a question. The key with more difficult passages is that questions are typically easier over there, so you're only going to need that much amount of time. The problem really is, if you engage in speed reading, you actually try going through the passage in about 2 minutes, then you need to, while answering questions, you need to go back and reread. You end up taking 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes per question, and you're not as confident. You still end up taking the same 8 minutes over there. So that's, speed reading doesn't help you solve the passage quickly. It doesn't help you answer more questions correctly, which is kind of what the whole point of it is. Okay. Again, bottom line is, if you comprehend well, you're going to read less than a minute or just about a minute to answer each question. That's something that we have seen, and that's something that hundreds and hundreds of our students have seen. Here is a quote from one of our former students, Anastasia. She says, you should read all the text, not only the first and the last sentence of each paragraph. As long as you understand the whole paragraph, it only takes 30 to 50 seconds to answer each question. Okay, and again, she gives these 3 points over here. Read to understand, analyze each part and understand why it's given, and read with what we call as the SC hat. Why? Because when you read with the SC hat, you're trying to analyze each structure of each aspect of a sentence, and you're extracting the meaning out of it. Once you do that and you combine those meanings, those stories start to form, and when you have those stories, answering questions becomes easier. We talked about Nishant early on in the webinar. He says something which is very similar. He says, do not stress about timing at all. Take 3+ minutes to read. Why? Because it has this initial investment of time, but once you do that, you can answer questions very quickly. Nishant, when you actually watch a success story, I think we have a success story over here. You can download his ESR, and you can see that he was able to get to that 90th percentile in RC, and he took 2 minutes per question to answer, which is the appropriate time to answer questions. You can actually click on this and download his ESR over here. As another student, Rohit, he went from a V27 to a V41. And when he got a V27, his quote was, in case of reading comprehension, I was forced to read the passage multiple times for the reason that I didn't understand it the first time around. And then once he focused on slowing down, he really said the need to reread passages actually went down significantly. V41 is that 94th percentile on verbal. And again, go to the YouTube channel. You can see not just one, not two, but 100+ students repeating the same advice in different words, by the way. And then whosoever has given you that speed reading advice, go to their YouTube channel and see how many unedited interviews they have and do the comparison. So how do you prepare for that 90th percentile? The first thing is understand how to read, which is where, go through the Master Comprehension course if you're an e-GMAT student. It's really important you do that. It's really important you understand how sentences are structured, which is where you start with building blocks of a sentence, how a long sentence is formed, and how do you deconstruct long sentences. Then understand how to read, which is where the pause points are really important. A lot of people, when they go through these files, they feel, hey, this is relatively simple, and they don't focus on imbibing this methodology. But people who do, they find life in SC and RC becomes just so much more easy. In fact, we've had students who've gone through the Master Comprehension course and without even going through any concepts in SC have gone from 30th percentile to 60th percentile in SC. And then they swear by this course. Then in RC, make sure you go through all the various concept files starting from main point. And again, you can really see you have 2 lessons on main point, and you have then just concept level practice and then application level practice over here. Then go to detail. And again, go through this very diligently, that each of these main point files, you need about 30 minutes to go through these over here. Okay, so spend that time, really important over here. One of the other pieces is, don't just do this as a checklist. How many of you, when you study, really say, okay, I have 3 files to go through it, and because sometimes you feel short on time, you try and rush through them because you focus more on completing stuff. How many of you do that? How many of you study that way? And again, be honest about it. Say, okay, I have to do 3 activities today, and I'm going to get through this. And sometimes, because you only have 2 hours and it seems short, you try rushing through things. Okay, I have one person who said to me, do not do that. If you're aiming for that 90th percentile, it's not about finishing a checklist. It's about focusing on learning. So when you do something, get completely immersed in it. Tell yourself, I am going to make sure that I understand this. Question what you're trying to learn. Don't just mug things up. And when you're reading something, visualize it. And initially this might seem like, oh, it slows you down. But the more you do this early on during your preparation, the faster you will go. Okay. Use reading strategies. Again, this will seem unnatural to you, but the more you use it, the more you're going to enjoy reading comprehension, the more it will not seem like a burden. The more you would actually look forward to doing it. And even when you get 15 minutes, you'd actually go back and say, okay, let me just go ahead and do this because it takes 15 minutes. And then figure out what your natural weaknesses or each one of us has natural strengths and natural weaknesses, and that's where data becomes really powerful, because it identifies what those natural weaknesses are, which allows us to go back, revise those portions twice, sometimes thrice, and then we overcome those weaknesses. But if you don't overcome those weaknesses, you remain at that 680, 670 score. You don't get to that 730 score. Again, if you need those lines, start with my study plan. Make sure you know what is the right path for you to get to that target GMAT score. Make sure you know how much time you need to devote. Um, we In about a year, our students make about 10,000 different study plans, and I can tell you, very few study plans are identical to one another. A lot of people ask me this question. They say, hey, how long do I need to finish the SC course? And my answer is, I don't know. It depends on what your starting point is. Why? Because it's not about finishing the SC course that allows you to get to that 90th percentile. It's about making sure that you understand this. And to do that, sometimes you need to go through certain files twice. Sometimes you need to go through certain files thrice. And which is one of the other reasons why we don't like to give you a day-by-day plan. Why? Because it's not about learning the content. It's about internalizing it. It's about learning for impact. And if you have to do a certain file twice, you've got to do it. And which is where this piece, tracking metrics, is really important, which is where the feedback that you get every 30 minutes from our platform is really important. Why? Because that feedback is personalized to you. Again, you need help with the study plan, book a slot with one of our strategy experts, and make sure you answer the questionnaire that comes along with it. Right now, we've actually put in that questionnaire right up front over here. Okay. With that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. And if you have any questions, then I'd be happy to answer those. But before that, if you could give your feedback for Shraddha and Harsha, that'd be great. Again, this feedback needs to be for Shraddha and Harsha, because I didn't do the session. It was primarily these guys. And for those of you who want to book that study plan, you can book that study plan over here. And for those of you who want to make sure that you attend the sessions on how do you get a scholarship, how do you get into Harvard Business School, I have this on top, HBS Plus Scholarship. You can attend that as well. And here are some other interviews that you guys can watch. I have Nishant's, Anastasia's, and Rohit's interview over here as well. So these are debriefs, these are text debriefs, and you can also see those individuals. How much does it cost to book a study plan? This one's free of charge. Okay. And thank you for that feedback. And if you have any question that we have not answered, you can put that question in the Q&A pod. Yes, do you get the PDF? Thank you about that. Here is the session PDF. Yes, thank you. And here is the PDF that you can download. Yes, the study plan part is free. Yes. Okay, perfect, guys. Thank you very much. And I will see you in the Quant Workshop tomorrow. If you've not registered for the Quant Workshop, do so. One second. Let me just hide this. Anshika says, Harsha was awesome. Thank you, Anshika. And again, you can get the session pass for these two sessions by clicking on either of the links over here. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, guys, and I look forward to seeing you on the platform. How do we get info on other sessions? If you're on e-GMAT.com, you'd get info on the sessions. If you're opening our emails, you should be getting information on our sessions over there. Also, stay active on our YouTube channel. We post questions. We post these amazing explanations on our YouTube channel. You'd see those explanations. I think Harsha just created solutions to 6 of the most challenging SC questions yesterday, so we'd be posting them over the next week. Harsha will most likely be doing some of that for CR and RC as well. So so yeah, that's how you stay in touch, and through we're active on LinkedIn, we're active on YouTube, we are active on our own platform. We're not so active on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, but yeah, YouTube and LinkedIn are two channels that we're very active on. Okay, all right, guys. With that, I want to thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you on e-GMAT.com.